Recognizing that I volunteered as a Ranger, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession, I will always endeavor to uphold the prestige, honor, and high esprit de corps of my Ranger Regiment. Acknowledging the fact that a Ranger is a more elite soldier who arrives on the cutting edge of battle by land, sea, or air, I accept the fact that as a Ranger, my country expects me to move further, faster, and fight harder than any other soldier. Never shall I fail my comrades. I will always keep myself mentally alert, physically strong, and morally straight. I will shoulder more than my share of the task, whatever it may be, 100% and then some. Not only will I show the world that I'm a specially selected and well-trained soldier, my courtesy to superior officers, neatness of dress, and care of equipment shall set the example for others to follow. Energetically will I meet the enemies of my country. I shall defeat them on the field of battle, for I am better trained and will fight with all my might. Surrender is not a Ranger word. I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy, and under no circumstances will I ever embarrass my country. Readily will I display the intestinal fortitude required to fight on to the Ranger objective and complete the mission, though I be the lone survivor. Rangers lead the way.
Welcome to Project Sapient, everybody, and on this nice, cold, brisk Boston day, it's nice. I love this weather. Just kidding. But thank you all for tuning in, and like always, thank you for our sponsor supporters. We'll start with AAA Police Supply. Make sure you head to AAAPoliceSupply.com for all your law enforcement needs. Use the coupon code Sapient2025 to to get discounts on whatever you purchase. And also, don't forget, head over to Havoc Journal, where it's a one-stop shop for news, various articles, human interest stories, veterans, law enforcement, first responders, you name it, they publish it. Yours truly, avid contributor to the Havoc Journal, where I have, over 100 articles published with them, and to include, they help me, Havoc Journal and Second Mission Foundation, help me publish my first book, The Resolute Path. So head to Amazon and please, by all means, feel free to purchase. I'll also sign your book. If you send it to me, I'll sign it and send it right back. So we're doing that too. And like always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, just go to my email address, Ayman. Feel free to leave me messages, and I love reading all your messages, and I try to respond to every single one of them. And always like, share, comment on Apple Store, or on podcasts about the podcast, get the word out there, awareness out there about this podcast. So, to begin today, I think you heard the Ranger Creed earlier, and there's a reason why I did it this way. And one of the things that endeavors that I've been doing is retired Command Sergeant Major Chuck Ritter invited me to be the editor-in-chief to Objective Arte, and more about that coming soon. If you have not listened to the podcast of Objective Arte, I strongly suggest you go ahead and do it. And head over there, subscribe, and also sign up for the newsletter, because yours truly being editor-in-chief, I do contribute to that, and I put in all sorts of great information out there. But as part of Objective Arte, I started to notice a name that really, I was like, holy crap, he's part of this too now, and that name is Matt Eversman. Now, if you don't realize or remember who Matt Eversman is, I'm going to remind you, all right? And this is his bio. In August 1993, Matt and his Ranger Company deployed to Mogadishu, Somalia, in support of Operation Gothic Serpent. The battle was made famous by the best-selling book and movie, Black Hawk Death. Matt spent almost 9 years in the elite 75th Ranger Regiment. He later served at the U.S. Army War College and taught leadership at Johns Hopkins University. Matt's last military assignment was an infantry company first sergeant in the 10th Mountain Division. He and his men spent 15 months in Iraq during the surge, fighting al-Qaeda and implementing counterinsurgency strategy. Matt was a master-rated parachutist who wore Royal Thai, Egyptian, and British airborne wings. He was a sniper and an honor grad of Ranger School. He retired in 2008, spent a decade in the healthcare, nonprofit, and data management sectors before exploring his own entrepreneurship spirit. In 2018, Matt and his wife started Eversman Advisory, a consulting firm in West Palm Beach, Florida. Their focus on individual excellence and emphasis on the elite mindset allows young leaders to impact their teams immediately. For his service in Mogadishu, Matt was awarded the Bronze Star Medal with Valor device. In 2019, he won an Emmy for his PBS documentary, Send Me, about the advances of battlefield medicine in Afghanistan. He has also co-authored 5 nonfiction New York Times bestsellers with James Patterson. Their 5th book, American Heroes, made its debut in October 2024. Their 6th book due in 2025, and it's about teachers. Quite an honor to have you on the show, brother.
Well, the honor is mine, and truly, it's flattering to be here. I mean, seriously, and I just say, our good friend Chuck Ritter is either responsible for this, so if it sucks, blame him. But in all honesty, and I say that to be so cheesy, but Chuck was so emphatic about you as well. So again, it's sort of like Heckle and Jekyll here. So thank you for having me and what you do and continue to do. Well, it's surreal. It's so surreal to talk about that. Not so much the event, but the portrayal of that event, without, at least in my mind, sounding like a complete, jackass. Answering anything about the movie, but I do say, in all honesty, I think overall they did an amazing job with it. And as you and I were talking the other day, I think when people now have a visual about, what urban combat is like, certainly what was going on in 1993, but I would say all through, GWAT, if you kind of wanted to have an idea about what was going on when you'd hear about battles in Fallujah or in Kandahar or fill in the blank, any built up area, you could kind of look at it. Again, I don't want to say that to take away from anybody fighting anywhere that's like, man, you're leaking oil, but, at least sort of in theory, they did a good job. So we now know what it's like fighting, in a built up area.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, with that movie, it's sort of also, I know, once we started Afghanistan and Iraq, I remember when I was at boot camp, at the time we were still doing like jungle warfare sort of tactics, kind of, European theater type tactics and movements. And sure enough, after we went into Iraq, it turned into, all right, we got to learn urban warfare because it's a whole different animal on how to fight it and to be effective in it. So everybody, the Army's focus all of a sudden kind of went from, all right, open battlefield to now, city streets. And it changed a lot of the way we conducted ourselves in the battlefield, because now there's no front line, right? The front lines are everywhere, no matter where you are in an urban warfare type setting. So I'm kind of going to take us a little back in time and then kind of talk a little bit about Mogadishu and especially what you've been put in an extraordinary situation and how did you cope with that and how were you able to build yourself after that, because that's in the end the most important part and the hardest part of being human is being forced to do something and then that thing changing you. But then what do you do after that? Do you rise or do you fall to that? So that's kind of where I'd love to discuss with you about that and to talk, about all the things First Sergeant Eversman has been doing since after Mogadishu and after the surge in Iraq. So if that you don't mind, Matt.
Yeah, no, man, it's good. Again, I think there's so much to peel back, not on me, but on the direction and what Project Sapient do and what Objective, Arites do, and this whole, beyond the surface stuff. Because I think not to get too deep too soon, but this fallout of 20 years of watching war, and the warrior culture, and all of that, in our faces, in our screens, all the time. I think it has there's a little bit of unintended consequences that goes to that everything that you're talking about, no one ever talks, never gets shown. And I'm not just talking about the bad things and the stressful things and the challenging things, but just the general life of the people afterwards. Like nobody ever gets to see that. Nobody gets to talk about it. So again, cheers to you, man, and for Chuck and Greg for what they're doing, and just we're moving in the right direction. So anyway, I didn't mean to
Yeah, no, no,
down that wrong path too soon.
no worries, no worries, man. So let's start with this. When did you actually go to Ranger School?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
When did you go to Ranger School?
So I went in the last hard class, as they like to say, in 290. I was a winter ranger, but the great news is that I started in 190 and got to spend time in the gulag, which was just fantastic. Which I think anybody that really values the ranger experience understands that time in the gulag is a necessary evil, and it's part of that process. Yeah, dismal start in 190, and then got into 290, and mercifully made it straight through. How about you?
All right, perfect. And you went through honor grad, right? You became honor grad?
I was the Merrill's Marauder Leadership Award winner. It was a bit of a shock to me as a young enlisted guy, to be called up there with kids that were obviously pretty talented. But I was very, very thankful and very grateful. That was probably more peer oriented, I think. One of those cool honors. And again, I don't want to be that guy that's, look at me, but I look back on that, walking away with that award. They gave me a nice compass. And I just remember, man, that was like the coolest moment of my life. I had a college dropout. I mean, I failed out of college, after my junior year. I mean, who does that? Nobody does. I had so many failures in not to woe is me, but, so many failures then, to get through Ranger School and then to be, to get an award. Boy, that was like the greatest thing in life. So anyway, sorry about that.
But I never went to Ranger School. Just want to make sure. So I didn't get the chance or anything like that. Kind of my path in the military went after I was medically discharged because of overseas stuff. It fell short on that, which is fine, and it is what it is. But yeah, I never went to Ranger School myself. So, but you met Dave just before we started recording.
Okay, I'm sorry. I mean, well, that's embarrassing, and I apologize. That was what a jackass I am. I misunderstood what you were saying to him and about him. So, forgive me. Well, listen, man. I again forgive me for being such a dumbass, but but I will say, Ranger School was a good. That was kind of the reason. Two reasons I joined the Army. One was I remember seeing on television, this ad of the Rangers, and when I decided to go to the Army, I'm like, hey man, I want to do that. I need to do something hard. Of course, it's not the be all end all of everything in the military, but for me, it was a great, to accomplish something challenging, which I had never done before. It really had that there was just such a great satisfaction in doing it.
Yeah. And so now, you graduate Ranger School and you get your orders for Somalia. What was going through the regiment? What were your thoughts at the time when all that went down?
Yeah, so just a quick back, I went to the 10th Mountain, my first enlistment, I was with the 10th Mountain Division when I got to Ranger School. And it's sort of the funny story was my roommate and I in the 10th Mountain, we had gone through basic training and everything together. He got to Ranger School before me. And, we were just hell-bent to go to war. Like that truly was, why'd you join the Army? It's like, man, 1987, 88. It's like we're going to go fold up the Russians at the Fulda Gap in Germany. Like that's what you do. We just want to go fight. Anyway, that first enlistment, missed Panama. I was actually in Ranger School during the Panama invasion, but that didn't happen. And then when Desert Storm kicked off, it seemed like everybody and their brother was going except for the light infantry unit. We missed that one, so 0 for 2. I originally was going to get out of the Army. I was just going to do one enlistment and punch, but this desire to go to war was really a big deal. And I know if everyone's heard this right off the bat, they're like, man, how cavalier can somebody be? And I know that in one sense it is, but on the other, I can't be any more truthful. That's just and as I tell people today, I'm like, you look at everybody that joined after 9/11, they want to go to the show. They want to go fight. right that wrong. So I, kind of figured out that if I could get into the special operations community, if I could get to the Ranger Regiment, mathematically speaking, I had a much better chance of getting deployed for a real world mission. And so that was sort of what got me to, in 1992 down to Fort Benning. I made it through all the assessments and everything. And yeah, showed up at Benning and was like, man, we're training to go to war. And so when the day comes that they're like, yes, sir, indeed you are. It was like the greatest. You would have thought the entire unit, Bravo Company 3rd Ranger Battalion, you'd have thought they were just giving them free money that day. The excitement, the cheers, and just general. I don't remember thinking anything bad about anything at that other than we were all getting ready to go and do something amazing because we're going to war.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, it's funny. I mean, the way you put it, sure, some people might think it's cavalier or whatever, but, for those of us who joined during GWAT and, shortly after 9/11, we knew we were going to war, right? It wasn't like we joined, just for the college benefits or whatever else. No, we joined because we wanted to go fight. That was the reality. Like, that's what we wanted to do. And for those who are like, oh, that's kind of messed up. Well, that's the reality of a soldier, of a combat soldier, right? You train up and they train you and train you and train you and train you. And you get to a point like, all right, when am I going to go use what I've been training to do, So I'm sure for you guys, I mean, all that training and all that ramp up, yeah, you guys were like, dog without a bone. You needed to go satisfy that craving, if you want to call it, essentially to do your job, right? What's training, for what end? Well, yeah, you got your orders. Like for me, when I got my official orders to go head to Iraq, I'm like, there it is, got the orders finally, so that's funny. And I even sought out units that were deploying to jump on with them. If I wasn't going to get that letter, or if I wasn't going to get those orders, I was going to just go with a different unit, where they allowed you at the time during early part of GWAT, no matter what unit you're in, if a unit is.
Yeah. No, and thank you for that better clarity. I mean, thank you for that good clarity, because it's hard to imagine not going when you have the chance. And I know that there's a million reasons, and it's not a broad stroke, universal, binary yes or no, because, hey, life is life, and everybody's got something going on. But just kind of in general, to that attitude of good versus evil, right versus wrong. It's kind of, I find it a little troublesome when I meet people that don't see that. And again, that's not saying I'm super soldier and super brave or anything. I'm neither of them. But that idea, though, in your knuckle-headed, brain housing group in your heart, that I at least got to go try. Like that's where I got to go and hopefully come back from it. I don't know. It's someone in there. I just find it's just something interesting about what drives people to do what we do and what you continue to do.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. It's one of those $1 million questions of what drives certain people to do certain things, especially call to service or a call to arms or whatever. Because we all felt it, right? Shortly after September 11th, we all felt that call, right? We all felt that, all right, we need to go fight because someone has attacked us and now we need to go. So that call to action is very real for some of us, right? I mean, some others don't really feel that way. That's why they never joined. That's why, to me, there's always that. At the time, I remember in 05, 06, actually, I used to see this number, 0.45%. And that number represented the amount of people that were in the armed forces compared to the rest of America. So less than 1% of the U.S. population was serving during GWAT.
Yeah.
And that tells you a lot about that less than 1% of warfighters that really believe in America, believe in the mission, believe in, protecting fellow Americans. That tells you that, well, there's not too many people that do that, not too many of those that would feel this way. And it's amazing to me, even as now in law enforcement, like there's almost 1 million cops across America. and that's still less than 1% of the human population, not human, of the American population, right? So to me, I find it interesting that in both services, whether it's military or first responder, it's always less than 1% of the American people that are willing to serve. And so it's an interesting, interesting and, thought-provoking type thing is like, all right, why is it always the less than 1%?
Yeah, no, it's I was telling somebody the other day, I'm like, if I really had the kind of dough that I need to do this, I never had to worry about working. I go back to school just to study that human behavior, to really, really dig in and do a study and write about that and see, because it's fascinating. And it doesn't mean I'm all bad people by any means, and not trying to be like so self-righteous about everything, like, you didn't do, but there is a little bit of just, it's kind of, I scratch my head. I'm like, just kind of scratch my head, and I'll shut up there before I spontaneously combust.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like now let's get to, directly to Operation Gothic Serpent, right to the battle, right when that first Black Hawk went down, right? And we see it, everywhere, all over. I mean, even now, the documentary on Netflix that's out there, Surviving Black Hawk Down. I mean, when that first Black Hawk got hit and went down, I mean, what thoughts were going through your head at the time?
Well, it's like everything, and I mean, I say this. I think sometimes I say we veterans in general, particularly when we talk about combat, tend to think, oh, like to whomever we're speaking to, and forgive me. So I say you a lot, but I really mean me, because I can only talk about me. I don't know how you would have felt or anybody else. So, but that idea to me, just as a lead in to answer that question, I found combat to be very scary. I just thought it was, before you go, it was really sexy and cool and everything was going to be awesome. And look at those guys. And I judge my success and my character and validate my warrior ethos by, how compared to other people and their attitudes going out of the wire. So for me, I found it like, wow, these people are really literally trying to kill me. And that was an unsettling feeling. However, it was incredibly exciting to be around a group of really good guys that kind of counterbalance that for me. And it was never paralyzing fear, but it was a healthy fear, I should say. So I say that kind of going in, when we first got on the ground on October 3rd, we were an immediate lit-urgent casualty. We went right from zero to chaos immediately. That was it. And, so these sort of like a bad movie in slow motion, like there was just like this string of bad events that were happening to my guys and me. I see that kind of like when you say, well, what do you think when the helicopter was shot down? My first instinct was, oh shit, man, you got to be kidding me. Like if this isn't supposed to happen, but neither is a kid falling out of the helicopter or fill in the blank or the radio not working. Like all these things, like I don't think it even occurred to me in one sense how catastrophic that was, this change in the mission, other than, hey man, that's where we got to go. This is the change in the mission. We got the bad guys we were after. How do we get to this first crash? I have no memory of thinking other than the mechanics of this is the natural thing you got to do. And shit, it's scary. But again, how do you do it? How do you get from A to B? And maybe it's just tuning it all out. But, all this is happening. And of course, I only have one small piece of this battlefield. There's 3 other blocking positions. There's all the assault, the Delta assaulters, all the helicopter guys. There's all this stuff going on. And I can only have one little myopic piece of this that I know what's going on. And, it was, crazy is a horrible word to describe it, but, that's the only one I can say. It's just craziness. Like, man, we're shooting at bad guys as fast as we can pull the trigger. like from the get-go. And you know, if you watch some of that, I haven't seen all 3 episodes, but you watch some of that, you know, there's footage on there on that surviving Black Hawk Down thing I'd never seen before. I'm like, wow, this is like seeing fire for the first time. And that, like, holy shit, man, these guys, you know, are getting after it just like, you know, like we felt we were. But anyway, a long-winded answer to your question. Go ahead.
So that's the thing. So, like, you know, it's funny the way you said it, because even to this day, right? So you know, one of the experiences I had overseas was, you know, an IED strike where it killed a fellow soldier. And, you know, we heard it over the SINGARs, over the radio, and, you know, we weren't that far away. We raced down there because that was our only thought was, oh, shit, something bad just happened. We got to get there. And that's all that was going through our minds. You know, we weren't thinking, shit, am I next? Or, you know, nothing like that entered our brains, right? We just went to back our fellow soldiers up. We set up the perimeter. We did all that we had to do. And I remember my specific task, which almost became which was automatic, which is funny that, you know, again, like you say, you know, people don't realize in combat, it's ugly, it's nasty, it is what it is. But at the same time, there's microdose of control you have because of the training you went through. My job, I mean, I remember going right over to the SINGARs, because at the time we had the battalion commander in my gun truck, and he was like, hey, Sarge, get the talk online, and I want to be able to talk to air support also. And I said, absolutely, sir. And in my head, automatically, I mean, I'm doing it right now, I think it's switching all the numbers, putting all the frequencies together and everything, and just doing, I'm not a radio operator, but you know what, that was the job I was given. So, yep, no worries. Did all that I had to do. And it was so automatic for me. I felt like an out-of-body experience where it was like my training took over, and I just did it. I ended up helping landing the Black Hawk, medevac, and ended up, you know, carrying litters of the, you know, 1 KIA and a couple wounded soldiers. But it all was so automatic that I didn't even think. The only thought I had was, all right, got to get our boys out of here.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, 100% that this idea of, yeah, listen, train to a high standard and all that kind of stuff, so that it is instinctive, it's muscle memory. So that when you're scared and adrenaline pumped and all this stuff, you can do basics, because basic tasks are really hard when you're under that kind of pressure. At least, again, I think so. I thought so. I remember watching a guy try to, you know, back in the 90s, we had these pressure dressings. And, you know, they were in a little vacuum sealed. This is before all the IFAC super duper shit came out. But, you know, they had those the old like Vietnam, you know, pressure dressings. And, you know, your kid's wounded, you get shot, and we're trying to get him bandaged up. And a guy's trying to open up the pressure dressing. He can't open it. He's got his fast rope gloves on, and he can't tear the plastic. You know, he just can't do it. I'm watching it. It's like a fish slipping out of his hands. And, you know, finally I'm like, dude, you know, and you just rip it off and you just give it to him and let him go through it. But it's like these simple tasks are so hard. So like you said, if you're trained to that really, really high standard, really works. You know, I remember one time in the battlefield, and it sounds like you did too. Again, unfair. I hate when people do that. But, you know, just in the middle of a firefight, I can remember like kneeling behind this car, and I was just like, wow, man, that's just like training. You know, I remember just thinking, having that moment of thinking like, this is why we did that. You know, I don't remember whether it was doing the Kazovac or whatever, but one of those events, I'm like, yeah, man, that's why we did that. Like, that's pretty amazing.
I remember kind of leading up, training up to go to Iraq. We did a lot of mount training, right? Tons of mount training over and over and over. And for people who don't know what mount is, for our civilian listeners, that's urban warfare training. That's like, you know, you're training room to room, and, you know, the military built these large structures for us to train in. That way we're able to, you know, work on the skill of CQB, close quarter battle. And I remember I was put in charge of an entire squad during this training event. And at the time, again, it was like, holy shit, all right, here I am in charge. You know, and you know, you think back, I was only like 21 years old. So I was still a young kid, right? All of us are kids at that time, you know, and they throw you in charge of an entire squad, and you're like, okay, I remember we went to our objective during that training and everything, and, we were in the woods and doing the land nav, and we finally got to our objective, and we went to hit the structure, and the instructors hit me with everything. What could go wrong went wrong, right? They purposely, we were getting pummeled, artillery simulators everywhere, just as much chaos as they can bring to the fight. And I remember I just froze because it was just overwhelming. And then I hit that cognitive overload, which we learned much years later what that does. And the reasoning behind the Army doing it a certain way is you hit that cognitive overload, and I froze. I'm like, shit. Like, I had nothing. I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. The instructors ended up indexing, like, okay, let's take a break and let's debrief what just happened. And they did a good job, and they were rough on me. Dude, I fully admit it. I froze, I fucked up, I wasn't giving orders, whatever. And we kind of rinsed and repeated, and then all of a sudden everything was clicking with me. Like, remember your training, remember this, remember that. Like, everything kind of came back to me after that. And then that's when I said, like, you have these micro dose at your will, so to speak, where it's almost like playing a chess game out there, especially when it comes to urban warfare. If you want certain things to happen, you have to do certain things, and you have to sacrifice some level of safety as a result in order to get that movement done. And that's something I learned early on during training. So training for that high standard, like you said, really shows when shit really hits the fan.
Yeah. No, there's so many things that you validated for me, Ayman, in your conversation a second ago. And I must admit, I'd never heard that phrase, cognitive overload, but that's exactly what happened to me. And you realize from that too, that we think that this is lasting forever, minutes and minutes, and you realize it's just nanoseconds. But in your mind as a leader, like, all these things, like, that you're trying to process and comprehend and make a decision on, like, multitasking at its, nth degree. I mean, I couldn't do it, and then you realize eventually something clicks, and it comes down to, like, man, I know what to do. This is bring it down to the simplest distillery, or distill it down to the most basic, simple things, like take care of a life, loss of life, limb and eyesight, no matter what. That's what you do, and figure that kind of shit out. But I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. I was just going to follow on and say, like, what I learned from that too, kind of in that same position as you were describing, is that conversely, you do always have a second. You can stop as a leader, or a follower, whatever it is. You've got a second. You don't, rush to failure and all the cliches that they use. But you realize, like, this is a big emotional event and things are happening. But another couple of seconds, probably, if it's going to save my time in the long run, it's a smart move. Take a second and make sure you understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing I'd love to touch on is Chuck told me one thing about you while you were there, is that sort of healthy respect to the Somalis that you had while you were there. That sort of, you didn't, like, I felt that was the same way when I was in Iraq, is like, all right, we're here for the people, not just the American people, also people of Iraq, to help them kind of get rid of Al Qaeda and whatever else they got going on. So I had this sort of respect for those who were doing the right thing and doing, trying to work through the problems that they're having. I mean, was that also your mentality when you were over there? Kind of, there were some, they were good people and decent people and decent human beings, because in the movie, it kind of portrayed you also as, like, recognizing that they're also people too.
Yeah. So going back a couple of things to answer that, that was my first deployment. So all the stuff that you think about, and I say again, I mean me, all the things I thought I knew about what it would be like, were generally speaking wrong. I mean, leaking oil all over the place. And one of them was, as simple as it sounds, like, we're not going there to fight the Somalis. We're going there to fight, Mohammed Farah Aidid and his militia, who is absolutely just, decimating this population. I mean, he's killing them wholesale. So right off the bat, this idea like, hey, no, I mean, these people, as a Westerner to go over to the say Mogadishu, I mean, let me step off the plane. I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, I thought going to the jungle to Panama was sort of like poverty and, whatever that, all the places, those little villages in Panama by the jungle. I thought that was poverty. I thought Korea, there were certain impoverished sites, but man, Mogadishu, Somalia, sort of league leader when it comes to, poverty and just a shitty hand to be dealt. And so to see that and realize like, man, we're here for them. Like we really are here for them and to protect them. So that was the first one. And then the second thing was to realize, like, I saw something the other day about perspective and perception, and you like, these people are under the thumb of a really bad guy named Muhammad Adid. So they're not going to come out and wave a flag. They're not going to come out and be, pro-American, which immediately you think like, oh, these people are horrible. They're not. But they live under such an oppressive, world that you have to be able to see beyond that, and as a young 26-year-old white guy from Podunk, Virginia, and I only throw that all in to illustrate, to go to Mogan, the Horn of Africa, it's like about as far change in the world, it might as well be Mars, So to see that and realize like, hey, by the way, when you go out on a patrol through those neighborhoods, and you can see that these people are parents, and grandparents, and they're like, I don't know about these guys, but man, when these dudes come through our neighborhood, no bad things happen. And you can just get the sense that, these Somalis, some of them understood why we're there. Then again, you go to another neighborhood and, they're just like giving you the
Yeah, exactly.
in the shoe, just like you saw in the movie. And you're like, they can't win them all. So that's a long answer into it, but no, any more than I thought, like, gosh, I hate the Iraqis or the Afghanis and, whatever. I'm like, no, that's got no issue with the good people of Iraq, Sunni or Shia. Actually, I could care less. But, we're here to right some wrongs and not to get into the whole mission statements of everything in OIF and OEF. But yeah, in Somalia, I was just like, people are never going to get a break unless somebody does it. And I think the only people that can do it, honestly, are the guys with the red, white, and blue flags on their shoulders, to be quite candid.
And that's the thing. I've always said that whatever that mission statement was that was brought down by the commander-in-chief or whomever, SecDef and whatever else, whether it's OIF, OEF, Somalia, whatever, the soldiers on the ground are the ones that actually do the job. Right. It doesn't matter who gave the order. And a lot of times in Iraq, we had to really think outside the box to help the Iraqis who needed the help, whether get them running water or get them clean water, where we'd give them chlorine tablets, it just stuff that we knew as humans they need to survive, right? Their need to survive. And, one thing I won't forget is, we had this Iraqi kid at a village. I felt bad for him. He couldn't walk. He had some sort of disease where he couldn't walk. So I didn't know what it was, whether it was cerebral palsy or something, right? He wasn't able to walk. And so he didn't even have crutches. He didn't, he had crutches. It was like those makeshift, like long wooden, like if you think of it, like, those walk trails, like it's those big twigs and sticks and stuff. So me and my fellow soldiers, we commandeered a wheelchair out of the medevac tent.
Nice.
We'll call it commandeered because we wouldn't have been able to get it if we just didn't take it, honestly. And we put up in the back of our gun truck, and one of our patrols, one of our missions was out towards that village, and we gave him and the dad presented him this wheelchair for this kid.
Awesome.
That way he could sit, because again, to me, there's that famous line, like, why make enemies when we can have friends? Right. And that's the thing is, like, winning the hearts and minds. And I really adopted a lot of the special forces, kind of special operations mentality of winning hearts and minds to give me more intel than your average, because I remember doing those sort of humanitarian type missions out there in the villages, because again, I speak fluent Arabic. I was able to get so much intel back, so much intel back to the various units, the various people, stakeholders, whatever you want to call them, where I knew far more about my surroundings, the surrounding villages around my fob, than our own S2, because I was always out there talking and doing what I do. So that's the thing, is like bringing the human back to the soldier, right? The soldier is the one who does the job. The soldier is the one who's, and I do remember at one point, I think in the movie, and you can tell me if this was true or not, when you were up at the Black Hawk, I think this was at the beginning of the movie, when you guys were over, looking over some humanitarian type aid coming in, and then Adit's militia came in and started shooting people, and you requested to engage, and you were denied that request. Did that really happen?
No, that was pure. That was all Ridley Scott.
Okay.
But,
So I think I
it
figured
was,
is,
but it was based off of real stuff because the UN humanitarian effort had been pilfered by the militia, and they'd steal. We'd constantly, I think the UN, the US would constantly be putting food and grain and all this kind of shit out there. The bad guys would steal it. And they just come raid the drop-off sites, and I mean that really does happen. They just put my handsome twin up there to make this seem a little more engaging as a young sergeant, but no, that did not happen to me in real life.
okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure, because one thing is, that I noticed even when I was overseas, if there was like, let's say Al Qaeda or some insurgent group was attacking while we were in that area, like our job, we're gonna suppress that right away. Like we're not gonna sit by, request permission or anything like that. Like we're gonna engage the threat and protect people. Right? So that, okay, that's a little refreshing. So that was totally a Hollywood thing that they did.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a few, things where Hollywood and reality kind of part ways, but
Yeah. So now let's go past now. 10th Mountain First Sergeant, you redeployed to Iraq, or deployed to Iraq, and what was it like kind of going into another combat zone? Because you've dealt with Somalia, you had Mogadishu. I mean, all those experiences now combined. So you had sort of a break, so to speak, in service, right? Where you didn't really go into any combat sort of environment since Mogadishu, or were you
no,
still
nothing. A lot of training, a lot of travel. Almost went to Haiti, but no, nothing from 1993 to 2006. When I deployed deployed as a first sergeant to Iraq. But it was wild. But again, I thought, gosh, I learned a lot, in those few months in Mogadishu. I thought I knew, and I don't mean that to be so, self-righteous, like I am an expert on combat, but I did think I had a pretty good handle on what at least going to battle is like. The human side, seeing kids get wounded, seeing kids die, seeing all the heroism, seeing all the things. Like I'd been through that sort of cycle in a sense. So I'm like, that's what I mean. Like I think I knew something about combat, but man, to get to Iraq, at that point in the game, it's like it is a whole different battle. Like it is a completely different battle. And it wasn't necessarily the special operations versus conventional missions. I mean, in one sense it was, but in general though, this is like, man, we're going out of the wire to defeat Al Qaeda, ISIS, whatever we were calling them at the time, and get the coin, that counterinsurgency strategy implemented, which to me made sense to me. It seemed like a logical thing, but it wasn't like, hey man, you're going to get in a gunfight every 2 seconds. Every mission you go out, you're going to get into a gunfight. I'm like, this is more like, no, you're going to drive. You got a better chance of getting dead before you even get to the gunfight. With these IEDs, your soldiers have a much bigger chance. And this is just in my Matt Eversman sort of deductive reasoning, was like, this is a far more dangerous battlefield over here, because we're walking and we're driving everywhere. Mogadishu, we're flying. We get the best pilots in the world flying us, thank the good Lord. But yeah, what we're doing over here, wholly different story. I tell you, in some senses, I think it was far scarier in Iraq than it was in Mogadishu.
I mean, I would think, you're getting constantly shot at in Mogadishu. Like, you were essentially in the fight for your life, while during that whole battle, the entire time.
It was. I kind of chased my tail on it too because the Somalis, they would mortar the airfield periodically. They couldn't put a mortar round into the Indian Ocean if they tried. Except for one day, on October 4th, they were able to or October 5th, were able to get literally a lucky strike. The doggone Iraqis, the whether it was Al Qaeda or whomever, the doggone Sunnis striking back, put 75 Katyusha rockets, into with shocking accuracy. You're like, man, this is pretty fucked up, to be quite candid. Like, this is a whole different kettle of fish, man. But thankfully, we had a lot more firepower in Iraq than we ever did in Mogadishu. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's the thing that, when I was over there, and I'll never forget landing into Anaconda. By the way, where were you in Iraq before I continue?
I was in Yusufia. I was southwest
Yusufia,
of Baghdad in the CNN called it the Triangle of Death. Mohammedia, Yusufia, and Latifia.
And so we were near the town or the city of Kalis. I don't know if that was near you at all. It was all within that Sunni triangle of death. That whole So I was there in 2005, and then you got in 2006. So yeah, we kind of overlapped a little bit. But yeah, so what one of the things when we landed in Anaconda, because Anaconda at the time, if you recall, they were called Motor City.
Yeah, no, I know it's funny. I was just thinking about this. I mean, we were doing left seat, right seat ride coming into country, and we were just doing the switch, and the 101st guys are getting ready to punch like in the next week, and I'm walking into the town hall and the talk, shared the same building in Yusufia at the time, and it's whatever the incoming alert code's on, and I'm like, holy shit, man, we've been through this before, and I yell into the chow hall, incoming, and those 101st guys are just sitting there like, yeah, so what? Like, I just literally I remember, like, freaking, well, let's just say First Sergeant Eversman was a little perturbed at the lack of response from these guys, but I get it, because we were probably the same thing 15 months later. But at the time, I just remember, like, dude, man, they're trying to kill you, and you're trying to leave, and it'd best be good to get under some cover. But really, we're fine.
Yeah, no, that was us. Like when we first got there, yeah, we were running for cover, but then eventually it turned into like I'll never forget, like going on leave. We were at the leave tents, when you're going on leave, and they set you up, just for your next flight out or whatever. And I'll never forget, I'm laying on this cot, and we hear the mortars go over our tents, like the whistling. You hear it, and me and a bunch of soldiers, we just kind of got up a little bit, still eyes are sort of closed. We're like, and then we hear it hitting in the distance, and we're like, oh, we're good. We rolled right back over and went to bed like it was nothing. So it's just funny that you just get into those mindset, into that mode, which I completely understand 101st, where they're like, it's far, I'm still eating, man, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I must say, not to keep going back for more, but by the time we were there for the got what did they call it, had to stay for an extra 3 months, and
so you got stop loss,
whatever they call stop loss or something.
Yeah.
But anyway, by this time we built up the fob, and we had these great big generators, and the generators would overheat, so we built these swamp coolers, and I remember constantly have to go and do maintenance on them, and I'm going over with my little my little E4 mechanic buddy, and I'm showing him like what's going on, and we're looking around with something, and he fixes it. We walk away, and literally we get like 50 feet away from this thing, and fucking mortar comes right in. Right in. I mean, and not like just where we were standing, but pretty close. It would have been shitty, and we really would have. But and I remember this mechanic looking at me, and I'm kind of like, hey man, let's go get a cup of coffee. How about that? You just do. It's weird. It's surreal.
It is weird. I mean, I remember, again, just real quick, just to remember me and my squad, we were getting ready to head outside the wire, and, you're going over the mission brief, and the order that, the gun truck orders and all that stuff and how we're going to get out, all that good stuff. And I remember like maybe 200 yards away, a mortar hit. And I remember we just look over and we were very, again, like it was so cavalier. The truck commander was like, well, I guess we got to go. That came in a little close. Like, yeah, I guess we should. But it wasn't like panic. It was like just a low tone, like, I guess we should go. Like, yeah, I guess we should.
Right.
But again, it was so cavalier. We were so cavalier about, but that's so true. But one thing I want to lead into now is like the coming home. So coming home from Mogadishu versus coming home from Iraq. Was there a difference between the two for you?
No, I don't think so. I would say it for me personally, having done it once, doing it the second time, I think I was far more grateful, I guess. And by the second one, I was married with a child. But coming back, I came back and stayed in. I was kind of relatively early in my career, and I decided, man, I want to stick around. Like I like this Army stuff. But the funny thing was, gosh, as I'm saying this out loud, the funny thing was, when we came back in 1993, the U.S. wasn't at war. And so this was the only show in town. And oh, by the way, the Americans died in this. And it was, Americans died in this battle. And, kind of everybody in the world literally had seen it. So there was a bit of notoriety to it. But by the same token, nobody knew quite how to deal with that on the reintegration. I remember coming home and they're like, "Yeah, man, all right, you guys have a 4-day weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday, and kind of get back to it." You're like, "Oh, okay." Never been back from combat, but I guess that's what you do. You have a 4-day weekend, go on a bender, and then come back, and that was that. And I think we got a little bit better in the interim, but at the end of the day, I don't want to be like, man, everything sucks and everything sucks and everything sucks. But I'm not sure that we've been able to do this reintegration from any lens you look at. I'm not sure we've really gotten that much better, over time. And I mean, here we are today. We're not at war, and we're still trying to figure out how to help soldiers reintegrate. Whether transition into X or their physical, their spiritual, their mental, whatever it is, trying to I just don't know if we're really that good at it. I think we're better, but I've covered an awful lot in this conversation and this answer, man. So
No,
forgive me.
that's fine. Kinda, yeah, so kind of the thought is, so you guys came back from Mogadishu and there wasn't really a system in place. You had a 4-day pass. I mean, how was the regiment? How were you guys really like hyper vigilant the whole time, even while training? Were you guys very still that combat mode that you had to kind of, because yeah, you're right. The country was not really at war. You just had this, wicked battle in Somalia, Mogadishu. You come back home, and I remember like when I came home, one of my first thoughts was, here I am driving around, and just a week and a half ago, we had a soldier die during a mission. So it's like, to me, it was surreal to be back home where others didn't make it home, right? So that's that sort of survivor's guilt. So I mean, did you guys feel that, like, especially after coming home after Gothic Serpent, where you're like, damn, why did I survive this fucking crazy thing?
I remember, so we had a couple of weeks still in Somalia before we came home after October 3rd. And I had the great opportunity to talk to one of the Delta psychologists, which on the front end of this whole thing, we're like, why would they bring a psychologist to war? And then you realize, like, because this guy's good at sort of looking under the hood and giving you a quick tune-up when you need it. And that he did for me. And I'll never forget, the short answer because it'll lead into the question, the answer to the question was, one of my soldiers that was killed, Sergeant Casey Joyce, was a young married sergeant, the only married guy in my squad. So how do you go back and talk to a 22-year-old widow? Like, what do you say to her? And that's what I would talk to this doctor about. man, he was just phenomenal. Like, he was phenomenal. He just, like, you know, Jedi mind trick. Man, he gave me such amazing guidance, going back, and I put it, sort of followed his prescription to a T. And that all comes back to the, like, I didn't realize when you drill into, a little more below the surface, we're one company out of a battalion that got deployed. So all the other companies are like, you're seeing them in the chow hall. They can't appreciate it. He has 16 kids from Bravo company, all the same day, like that. Like that's a tough thing. So they don't quite know how to deal with you. So again, this integration stuff. And I remember driving down the freeway, in Columbus, Georgia. Man, when a truck would go over a pothole, and it would clank, the tractor and the trailer would bang together, on that metal. It sounds, just like an RPG hitting, a vehicle. Yeah, and pull off the road. Literally, it took a while. Like, there was some of that as that would go on. You're like, man, that's really, oh, that's crazy. But we're young and knucklehead too, and we're just laughing at it. Like, you guys see that ever happened to you? And they're like, yeah, man, and go to drink a beer and call it a day.
That was nice, man. I mean, when we came home, I'll never forget. We were at Fort Dix, New Jersey. That was our demob, and we got, I remember what the Army did for us was a 2-week reintegration into society, which to me is like, what the hell does that mean? I'm still on a military base. I'm still, marching around, doing this, doing that. That's not really reintegrating into civilian society. But anyways, so I remember walking, we're walking to and from the chow hall or wherever. I forget exactly where we were going, but I'll never forget. I heard this loud boom, and exactly like you thought, RPG, IED, like whatever. And my head snapped right away. It was a semi just going over the speed bumps on base, and it makes that loud crash, in the trailer. And my heart must have been like 200 beats a minute, because man, I thought it was like, being back over there. And like you said, like afterwards, we're going down, we go to the NCO club or wherever, to the bar, and we just laugh about it. We're like, oh, dude, that was hilarious. Dude, we all jumped, and I looked over there, and, and not realizing that's actually not a good thing to have, and that's the thing. It's like, you start to realize as you get older, you start to learn that, well, that wasn't a good coping mechanism.
No. Hey, yeah, it's funny. Nobody ever said anything about any of that stuff. Zero. Like, just
No, I never did.
Get back and turn in your nods and weapons, and enjoy the day, and hope that nothing's broken.
So now it's going to lead in kind of what you've been doing now, right? Since Iraq, and I went over your bio, and I mean, a lot of great, impressive things. I mean, just the stuff that you're doing, to help young leaders kind of come up, and through your consulting groups and doing other things too, with Chuck and over Objective RTA. What sort of like your...
Yeah, so this sort of was born out of frustration, from my profession. I retired into the workforce like everybody else, and which is a whole story for another day. But had 3 different jobs for all the wrong reasons, chasing money because I'm like, yeah, I got to, house payment and tuitions and all that kind of stuff to do. And, I'm like, I got big shoulders. I can carry a heavy rock. It'll be all right. I've had my experience, and now it's for my family. And I realized that was a bad strategy. But what I kind of learned was, I should say kind of what I learned, however, though, was, man, in the military, and not just in the Rangers, but, in the military in general, as an institution, they do a pretty good job of developing leaders, just at face value, and some are doctrinally correct in everything they say, and others are maybe doctrinally correct in what they do, but they don't know how to say it. But in general, we train people to be in charge, and I think they do it very, very well. And this is one time I would include you in this. I think we would agree. We've worked with, maybe not all, but we've worked with probably some pretty good leaders, during our tenure. And I see that, then when I get out and I realize, like, man, and there's plenty of bad leaders in the military still, but despite the institution, are bad people and they're bad leaders, and that's enough said. But you get out here and you realize, like, man, just because somebody has a title on the masthead that says, leader, they're really not good at it. In fact, I found that, more often than not, there were a lot of very nice people, nice enough anyway, that were in charge probably for all the wrong reasons. Either had a good idea and were rewarded for it. It's like, here's my product or whatever, or made a big sale, whatever, but they couldn't get anybody to go down a dark alley with them, at gunpoint. And so after watching it, so it's just to land a plane, after watching this for a dozen years, and my third job ending, interestingly enough, was working for one of the best leaders I've ever worked for in general. It was a wonderful woman in Maryland who was my boss. And she was like, I always said she missed her calling. Like she should have been leading like the Ranger Regiment. She was that good. But, in general, the thing was like, if people out here from all these great schools, all the name brand institutions, work for name brand companies, if they didn't come into this equation with any idea about leadership, how are they going to learn? How will they truly learn? So this all comes down to, what could we literally take from the military and business experience and that amalgamation of stuff, and take out all the, heavy lifting, literally, like, hey, you got to go around and do a 12-mile road march every Monday and do the obstacle course. Because let's face it, Marge and HR and Larry and, tech aren't going to go out and do the obstacle course on Friday. They're just not. They're smoking and they're not going to do that. So, but they're good people. So what can we give them on Friday that they can think about over the weekend and put into effect on Monday? And then just bringing that back to all these kids that are on the couch after college. So to answer your question, that's the strategy. The question comes down, I think there's like 3 or 4 things, but the first thing is this idea of, and this is not an Eversman original, you heard a million derivations of it, but the idea of the whole man, whole person concept, and that's not work-life balance, because that's impossible, but you as a person figuring out how to be mentally or physically strong, morally straight, and how do you, just pick one of those, when we talk about the objective arete, one of those aretes, and say every day, I'm going to do something to keep myself, 1% better, again, if we're using all the business cliches, putting all that together, one thing just to be mentally, physically, and morally straight, today. So I can bring that in tomorrow and I can demonstrate that to everybody else that's around me. These things about doing the basics well. And there's a million, again, cliches that we all know from the military to come in. But probably I think the most important thing is, and I saw this when I was in Iraq. And if anything, I guess I would tell you, this is the thing that I think people need to stew over. We talk about leadership. And when you get to Bagram, or no, I guess it was in Kuwait. You get to Kuwait and they take you through the Serpentine and they have all this shit, stenciled onto the Jersey barriers. And I remember looking out the window and some, I'm sure, very well-intended sergeant major, who knows, garrison commander, put this down and said, we need leadership, not likership. And I remember thinking, like, I know what they mean. I know what they mean. And God love them, I do know what they mean. Unfortunately, when you tell 19, 20, 21-year-olds, that phrase, it means be an asshole. You've got the green light to be a dick. All you got to do is scream and yell and be not nice. And somehow in your little, and let's face it, that we know the group we're talking about, that makes it okay. And I'm like, no. Which, when we talk about, we follow them down a dark alley, this all comes back. I mean, so what do you tell these kids that, on Friday, to that whole man thing? I'm like, you need to think about, like, why would they follow you, young man or woman that works at the paint store? It doesn't matter. But why would they follow you down a dark alley if you ask them to, at midnight, and you really need them? Like, how are you going to get them to follow you? how are you going to get them to do that? And what do you think is important? Is that being well liked or being a dickhead? And I would tell you, I'm not saying being patronizing, but like, this idea of being able to lead them and being enjoyable to be with is important. And conversely, to them to remember, are they worthy of being led down a dark alley? Because let's face it, too, you're not a magician, young leader. There's a lot of assholes out here that refuse to play. And so if they refuse to play, don't have my team. Anyway, I could really go, but that fundamental piece of who are you as that person that's going to be in charge, and are you the kind of person that people would want to follow down a dark alley? I guess let's leave it there.
I just don't want to get yelled at, so I'm going to do this, versus, given that, over and over again, I mean, history has shown that fearful commanders, bosses, whatever, second guess strategies. They hoard resources, they micromanage, they stifle initiative, right? And that's the thing, like, there's all sorts of different quotes out there. I mean, one of them from, I believe it was General Patton, is like, and I think that gets lost with a lot of leaders where they put this kind of aura around them, like, yeah, I'm the leader, I'm the shit, and you're going to do what I say regardless. And, I've had plenty of times, military and even now policing, where I've seen it. Me as a sergeant, I see some other sergeants like just completely fail as leaders because of the way they are, and I'm not saying, I got to be best friends with my squad. No, they're going to know that I'm a leader, and they're going to know that, hey, the sergeant needs this done and he's going to get it done. And for me, I don't ever yell. I just don't. I find it very stupid in a profession where, especially in this type of profession where you're given a gun and a badge and this incredible responsibility to your community. Like, to me, I'm not going to yell at you. I'm going to tell you, hey, this is where you fucked up and you better fix it. And that's as far as I go, in terms of counseling. So that's the thing, like, leadership is more than just you as in the leader. It's the holistic approach to your organization as a leader.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with everything you said. And, there's this natural inclination to think that a likable guy or gal is a pushover. And that's absolutely not true. And you don't even gotta like the person. Like, as a friend, like, hey, we're like, again, the fraternization tends to, I think, a lot of times get things fucked up because most people are too mature, certainly at a young age and like in the military. But yeah, no, I mean, but I can still be friendly and crack the whip. I can still be likable and hold you to a high standard. I must admit, there is a little comma but in this whole theory. And I said, your leaders are magicians. I always do think, though, that I'm like, most businesses could probably stand to have, a real fucking just pipe hitting sergeant major guy that people, the get off my grass kind of guy, that just keeps all the other people in check when they like. I think corporate America could benefit. I really do. Despite everything I've just said about likership, I think you need that one guy or gal that just snaps necks when they need to on all the other shit.
Yeah. And that's the thing, so it's funny you say that, because I do agree with that. But to me, it also has to do with the type of individual you give that responsibility to, because I've seen it backfire bad. That individual, all of a sudden now, everybody gets that crack of the whip. You get second guessed on everything you do. And it's like, yeah, man, like, you were supposed to be the sergeant major, but tough but fair, not just tough. Like, not just with, you know what I mean? So it has to be like somebody that is able to do both, crack that whip when it needs to, and back off when everything's running, like when everything's running the way it's supposed to run. And again, like, in my organization, we have that, like in my policing, we do have those that are like that crack the whip when it's needed, but at the same time, leave everything else like, hey, shit's running smooth, then I'll let it run, versus finding a reason to yell at someone, finding a reason to snap, finding something off just to purposely, fuck with the troops. Like, to me, that's not necessary, in this stage. Like, I get young, especially young soldiers, 18, 19-year-olds. Yeah, they're going to need a lot of hand holding on a lot of like this tough, grizzled NCO that needs, to crack that whip. Like, I remember when I first spoke to my squad, and this was post-direct, like I just, came home and, I got my new troops, a couple of brand new privates out of basic, all that stuff. And I literally laid out my expectations of them as an NCO. I said, hey, listen, I'm not saying I know everything. I'm not saying I did this, whatever. I said, but I'll tell you this. You guys do your job. You're not going to have a problem with me. I said, you act like an adult, I'll treat you like an adult. You act like a kid, I will fucking find a way to make you miserable. And that's all I had to say. And that's it. Like, everything was run smooth. And I remember my corporal came up to me and he's like, hey, Sarge, whatever that was good. You just tell me what you need done and whatever. I'm like, and I took the corporal aside and I said, hey, listen, I'm going to rely on you to keep these guys in fucking check because I got a million other things I need to do, whether it's mission prep or whatever. So when I give an order, when I give this, my expectation is you make sure that shit gets done. Because if I have to double check your work, then something's not running right. And that's all I told him. And he kind of took it in and, man, shit was running very smooth, after that.
Nice. Right. Yeah, it's always nice when it works. People are people and love to people act like people. That's what my wife always says. I'm like, no, you were right, man. If we could figure it out, it would, we'd figure it out, it'd be easy.
For those cops, yeah, they have a long leash. Like, go do your thing, Some others, yeah, I'm a little more hands-on because they need it. They need that sort of hand-holding. And at the same time, I like to coach and mentor and teach. I don't like to counsel, right? I mean, I feel coaching, mentoring is different than counseling, right? I've had to counsel a couple times, but that's about it. But even then, counseling, it wasn't yelling, screaming, nothing like that. It was like, hey, listen, this is what you fucked up, and I don't want to see this ever again. And then that's pretty much it. That's as far as I go. And it gets done. And to me, that sort of style of leadership is needed, like you said, is needed a lot in the corporate world, because you have a lot of people who are leaders that honestly should not be leaders. And those who aren't leaders need to step up and become those leaders.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. So, Matt, not to take up too much of your time, what I'd like to do is, the way I usually wrap up these podcasts is, if you have any sort of advice for young leaders, whether it's police, soldiers, and, whatever you can think of a quick, something for them to think about, something for them to think about tonight or whenever they listen to this episode, what would that be?
Yeah, it's funny. You sort of hit me on my heels on this one, Ayman. But I was thinking about this today as I was out doing some work, and it was kind of along the lines because somebody said something the other day to me about, why do you join the Army? And I was like, it was a couple of reasons why I joined the Army. I kind of always thought I would. And I'm talking about before I went to the recruiter. I'm like, yeah, I kind of always thought you'd join the Army. Then when I realized, like, I need to join the Army because I got to finish something. But the thing is that the whole reasons, none of the reasons that I joined the Army, though, was out of, classic sense of patriotism that people tend to think, like, oh, we joined the Army because we're patriotic. I think I joined the military and I became very patriotic, more so than I had, the normal person. But the only reason I say this is a lead up to answer your question is, people join the military for a million reasons, and I'm sure they do. Law enforcement, and I can't look into anybody's soul and figure out what it was and whether it's a valid reason or not, or his is better than hers or whatever. But I do know that when I got into the military and this idea of going to war started to blossom more and more and more, and I realized, like, why do I do that? And so before I went to Mogadishu, though, like literally like the night before was when I realized that, I'm not doing this for me to be, the tough guy ranger, because I want to be an airborne ranger and go to war and do all that. Like, no, that's not it actually at all. that's just a selfish, jackass, stupid idea. You're doing this, Matt, to help others, to the Somalis, and so to throw that in parallel to your question, what I would throw out to young soldiers and cops, firemen, and anybody though, it's like, it's worth, sitting in that dark closet when over the weekend at some time, or going for a walk and thinking about kind of what got you here, and why you're doing what you're doing, and what really is what's going to motivate you to do this mission. And I think it's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but I think if you who were listening to this stop to think, and again, tune out all the noise, what do you really in your heart of hearts think about this, why you're doing it, the answer will probably come back to not shock you, might surprise you a little bit, but if you let your heart, kind of tell you, you might find yourself realizing, like, I've been doing this for the wrong reason, and I can fix it and do it for this right reason. And again, it's not like, oh my gosh, you're going to hell and you've done something wrong because you came in for the college money and you haven't figured it out yet. You still got to deliver, and you're going to. But that idea of like really finding that azimuth, that North Star, whatever, because I didn't know it till literally right before I went to combat. And it would have helped me out, I think, a little more had I known it sooner. Does that make sense? I think there's an answer in there.
Yeah, no, that is. And essentially, I mean, what you're saying, and which I understand, is like, remember your why, remember or think about your why, the reason behind your why. And, that's something I always talk about, even with Objective Arte. Actually, the latest newsletter I'm putting together is part of that, is like remembering your why. And I threw a Mark Twain quote in there in the newsletter. The two most important days of your life is the day you are born and the day you figure out why. And that's, to me, that is so true and so real, because, I was probably like you, like I joined the military, like I knew I was going to war, but it became crystal clear, like when I got there, it like really hit me when I got there. When, like you said, you see the poverty, you see what oppression actually looks like, and what it means to actually be free. And you're like, damn. Now I know, like, sure, I grew up, I know I told you, I grew up like, my family, we escaped 2 civil wars and all that stuff. So I had this sort of, I wouldn't say healthy idea, or I had this idea of what it's like to be oppressed, but I was too young to really think about it. But now as an adult, young adult going into war and seeing oppression, and then kind of thinking back to my life, I'm like, man, this, I could see why this sucks. And I could see why my dad escaped it. And I could see why my family left to America because of this, And so essentially, to come back to you, like, yeah, you remember your why, think about your why, and keep that in the back of your mind,
Yeah. Well, I said, much better than I can, and a lot more succinct. You could be my interpreter.
No, Matt, really, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor. And, we will obviously continue our conversations with Objective Arte and various other things that are coming down the pipeline. And I truly appreciate Chuck also for connecting us and, getting this conversation started. And, you could just give me 1 second to do an outro. And
all right, my friend, thank you for having me, and thanks for all you do and keep doing. And man, just keep chopping, man.
Yeah, we'll do, man. All right, hang out 1 second and we'll talk offline. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us on Project Sapient. I hope you got a lot out of this episode like I did. It's really awesome having Matt Eversman on and to talk about his experiences, especially post Mogadishu, post Iraq, and some of the things that he's doing with young leaders. Truly, he's still giving back even to this day, regardless of, what's going on. But like always, please like, share, subscribe, comment this episode, all the other episodes. I think we have over 300 episodes now. I've had tons of articles on there. And also, don't forget to order Resolute Path on Amazon. Yours truly, our first book published through the Second Mission Foundation. So, everybody, hope you enjoyed this, and everybody stay safe and stay sapient.